When it comes to visual drama and stunning effects, it's hard to find a franchise more bursting at the seams than the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Even Star Wars and Harry Potter can't boast as impressive a range of effects, not to mention the sheer number of installments of the MCU. But all that visual brilliance didn't come out of nowhere, and the MCU's effect on the broader world of the visual effects industry is a long story that begins around 2008 with the release of Iron Man, and climaxes, at least for the time being, with the stunning achievement of 2019's Avengers Endgame. Let's talk about characters. Making any movie look believable is a tough gig. Making 23 genre-defining, boundary-pushing, cultural, monolith-generating superhero movies look believable might be a task better suited to Hercules as an impossible labor. But even though the MCU is currently owned by Disney, Hercules must have been unavailable, so the job fell on the desks of folks like Jen Underdahl, the incredible VFX producer behind both Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. This reliance on actual human people rather than mythical heroes when it comes to rendering mythical heroes in the flesh on the silver screen has been a massive boon to the MCU, as it has unified, innovated, and invigorated the global VFX community along the way. Of course, Underdahl is only one of many exemplary folks responsible for the MCU's triumphant scenes and stunning sights, especially when it comes to creating our beloved superheroes and villains. Take, for example, some of the biggest and most detailed digital makeovers accomplished within the MCU, starting with Skinny Steve from the original Captain America. In order to make Steve Rogers' transition from what I looked like in high school to what I wish I looked like in high school believable, the actor would have needed to lose a bunch of weight and, 6 inches of height. Unsurprisingly, Chris Evans was unwilling to have his calves removed for the role, so a digital solution had to be found. Normally, this would have meant the standard approaches taken in Hollywood, a mix of motion capture and face replacement technology, but the MCU doesn't get its plaudits for no reason. In the end, the team behind Skinny Steve opted for taking the long, hard route Captain America himself would approve of. They digitally reduced the size and shape of Chris Evans' frame by frame by frame by frame by frame by frame until the result was a stunningly believable transformation. Actually, I take back that Captain America would approve of the hard way thing. The guy kinda did take steroids to get buff. Yeah, let's move on here. Rocket, yeah? Guardians of the Galaxy's rambunctious rodent of dubious morals and a penchant of firepower required an incredible effort to capture.
Ain't no thing like me except me.
During filming, a mix of human doubles, raccoon dolls, and in fact, one actual live raccoon named Oreo served as references, while the resulting raw footage was treated and synced up with Bradley Cooper's fantastic vocal performance in order to serve up a heaping dose of honest to goodness anthropomorphic raccoon. The teams behind Rocket managed this with such a plume that Rocket's able to carry emotional weight several times throughout his various moments in the spotlight, whether it's his conversation with Yondu, his impassioned lamenting over his own creation, or that one time he tried to make Thor feel better about, well, you know. Now, it's no secret that Bruce Banner and the Hulk have shared some moments of dubious appearance, looking at you, Lou Ferrigno, but even Mark Ruffalo's modern mean green should probably see an anger management specialist machine is not as impressive as the feat pulled off by Underdahl and her team with their rendition of Smart Hulk in Endgame.
And now look at me. Best of both worlds.
Getting the original Hulk to look human enough not to trip the uncanny valley effect in the audience was a triumph on its own. With Smart Hulk, the emphasis was placed even more on the merger of actual human person Mark Ruffalo into the fully digital Hulk. In interviews, Underdahl harps repeatedly on the importance of the Marvel production team getting out of the way of the VFX vendors and the actors in order to ensure a more effective end result. And Smart Hulk is a testament to that. Through a mix of motion capture and cutting-edge animation, Smart Hulk ends up utterly human and somewhat uncomfortably more than a little handsome. When it comes to the purple prince of perfect balance in all things, the teams at Marvel had their work cut out for them. Sure, Josh Brolin is a powerhouse of an actor, and sure, the MCU has more money than Tony Stark to throw at production, but making an entity like Thanos feel real was, well, the point on which both Endgame and Infinity War hinged on. If Thanos was not easy to watch and believable, both movies would have fallen flat, given that the one glove loving Snap Lord is the emotional center of Infinity War and the crux of Endgame. You don't believe me? Well, imagine Endgame, but now Thanos is played by Lou Ferrigno in purple body paint. That's a no-go, right? So how was this accomplished? Well, to hear Dan DeLue, one of the folks responsible for the Thanos project, tell it, it happened like this. First, it was decided that more of Josh Brolin needed to be present in the model for Endgame, so a highly detailed Zbrush sculpt was made and then shot off to 2 different vendors, Digital Domain and Weta, to actually bring the character to life. It's a testament to the progress pushed by the MCU in photoreal humanoid characters that we've reached a place where one can carry the weight of an entire film. Large-scale conflicts and locations. It's one thing to make a Hulk, it's another thing to make a Chitauri army invade downtown New York or send Benedict Cumberbatch whirling through the final psychedelic trip of 2001: A Space Odyssey as a casual plot device. But that's why Marvel is Marvel. Pushing through innovation in visual effects via global collaboration between vendors is like kinda their thing, in case you hadn't noticed. Consider Planet Ego, the living planet and kind of a jerkwad dad of Peter Quill. In order to capture what needed to be a fantastical but believably natural location of massive scale, no less than 3 different VFX vendors were brought on board, according to Christopher Townsend, the VFX supervisor for Guardians of the Galaxy 2, among other Marvel flicks. Apparently, the initial view of the planet were done by the VFX vendor Method, while the sequence involving Nebula and Gamora was completed via work done by Scanline VFX, and the third vendor, Weta, they rendered the final battle on Ego's underground areas. And a fun fact, according to Townsend, Planet Ego, all told, required about 500 billion polygons to render. There's another sequence, this one in Endgame, that really brings home just how prevalent and complex the VFX behind the MCU have become. Remember when Captain America fights Captain America? Yeah, so here's what that looks like in the movie, and here's what that looked like to film. Yeah, seriously, the whole thing is CGI, but you probably would not have guessed it. According to Jen Underdahl, a plate of NYC was applied to the background involving a mix of 2.5D and 3D assets, while even the telephones, the desks, and the chairs seen in the offices on either side of the walkways where the fight takes place are completely computer generated. Plus, in any shot where both captains are visible, one of them is a double with Chris Evans' face tacked on in post-production. Yeah, we've come a long distance since Mark Ruffalo's floating head in the Hulkbuster, I guess. Then there's the 500-ton elephant in the room, during which the United Avengers and accompanying kitchen sink of allies, friends, and persistent frenemies come streaming through the portals in order to do battle with Thanos. Don't make me snap my fingers, Thanos. Does he have a last name? Yeah, it doesn't matter. This whole sequence represents a truly titanic, undertaking for the teams working behind the scenes. There's a reason that this sequence earned the movie Outstanding Effects Simulations in a Photoreal Feature and Outstanding Composition in a Photoreal Feature at the 17th Annual Visual Effects Society Awards. Boy, that's a mouthful. How this was accomplished is once again best understood through a quote from Dan DeLue. One of the biggest challenges was dealing with the sheer size and scope of the battle. We split the battle between Cinesite, ILM, and Weta, dealing with thousands of digital doubles, over 50 hero characters, complex fluid sims, digital explosions, an entire digital set, each of the heroes' special powers, dust from the blip, wet raccoon hair, Doctor Strange magic. The number of effects are almost impossible to list. Without the heavy lifting of Weta, ILM, and Cinesite, we would have never finished. And that point harps on the real essence of what makes the MCU visuals what they are: collaboration. Talking about the achievements of the MCU, visually speaking, it's easy to fall into the trap of rattling off one impressive moment after another to miss, metaphorically speaking, the forest for each masterfully rendered tree. But the story of VFX in the MCU isn't one solely about individual achievements. Like DeLue admits, other people and other vendors outside their studios were needed to conquer the envelope-pushing challenges of crafting a generation worth of memorable cinema. Really, that's the legacy that the MCU brings to the VFX world. That's the end result of their decades of involvement. It may be silly to say, but the MCU franchise has brought a ton of high-level business into the industry, and it distributed that work throughout the world. It wasn't just one studio or one vendor that holds the acclaim of being the people who made Marvel happen. It was a global effort, a collaborative effort, and an effort that brought together and advanced the careers, technologies, and cutting edge of the visual effects community all at once. The MCU movies weren't just a booster shot or a boon to the world of VFX.
Assemble.
They've been at the forefront of a crusade to see the industry moved forward in leaps and bounds, possibly more so than any other franchise. Certainly more than any franchise in recent memory. I mean, with 23 films and more than 10,000 individual shots that required heavy VFX work, it's kind of a no-brainer that the MCU is leading the pack. And frankly, whether you like the movies or you don't, you have to give props to the teams behind the scenes. Personally, I love the movies, but what gets me going every time about the MCU story is the collaboration. Whether depicting every Avenger fighting on Titan or the studio's global network of VFX artists, the MCU is a shining example of what teamwork can achieve.